everybody joins and they get 5,000 tokens, AR tokens. Get 5,000 AR tokens. Those tokens have value because at the same time, 5,000 Hoove tokens are created. Hoove tokens are external tokens that we sell to investors. Investors buy the tokens, cash goes into the liquidity pool, thus creating more value within the system. You don't need the investors to buy the tokens for the AR to retain its value. You just don't. All that happens is that increases the float available to people later on. So it's in everyone's interest who has made it to that level to increase the float. One of the ways to increase the float is to sell Hoove tokens. Once we have, okay, I won't even get to decentralized exchanges yet. All right. When you join, you get 5,000 AR tokens. Your goal is your first sort of, well, that's not true. One thing you can do with your tokens is spend them. So I'm going to build a website. I will spend my 5,000 tokens on a Hoover to build a website for me. I got some value out of it. Wonderful. Hoover got 5,000 more tokens. Great. But now I'm out of tokens. So what do I do now? Well, you can, help somebody out to get some more tokens. Go mow their lawn or do a project for them. Get more tokens, spend them on your project. Great. You are now building a project without having had to raise any cash or do any fancy bootstrap accounting or anything like that. Okay. The other thing you can do with your tokens is collect them. And if you get to 15,000 tokens, you get a first choice. You get a choice of joining the board, which means that you vote on anybody's token payments who is below 15,000 tokens. So if I just joined and I have 5,000 tokens and I want to give all my tokens to Matt, all the board members have to vote that that's okay. One thing this does is protect new Hoovers from being exploited by older Hoovers. Like, hey, just give me your tokens; it'll be fun, right? Well, if if it requires a vote, that'll be caught in the nub. So one thing you to join the board. The value of joining the board is that you get a dividend at the end of the year. That dividend is based on the float. The float is the total amount of money in the liquidity pool minus the total amount of cash required to cover any Hoove tokens that have been sold. So if there is $20,000 in the liquidity account and if all the Hoove holders were to cash in their tokens tomorrow, and that would be $20,000, and the float would be zero. If there's 50,000 and it costs us 20 to cover that, then we have a $30,000 float. Dividend is 10% of annually is 10% of the float. If we have a $30,000 float, it would be $3,000 divided amongst everybody's stake in the dividend pool. You get a stake in the dividend pool when you join the board and you pay your taxes. So this year, let's say everybody has to pay $500 in taxes. Well, everybody put $500 in. So then they all split the dividend equally. But next year, if 3 new people join the board, well, they did not pay that last year's $500 taxes. So they would, if the taxes next year were $100 per person, everybody else would be at $600, and they would each be at $100, and would get a reduced dividend. So if you have banked up your dividend over the course of a couple of years, you could maybe take a year off paying your taxes because you won't dilute your dividend. All right. So if you are on the board, it's in your interest to get that float high. We get the float high by either selling Hoove tokens, by bringing in new cash from projects, or any new cash that enters the system increases the float, and you have an incentive on the board to make sure we don't pay out too much and we have a lot more coming in. The other thing you can do when you hit 15K tokens is you can become an EPE. EPEs have an equal stake in the portfolio. So any company that exits is the return is split equally across all of the people who chose to be EPEs. There are 10 EPEs and it's $1 million exit, then 100K AR goes on to each EPE stack. Yeah, okay, great. So you want to get exits in so that you can get that creeped up. In order to qualify for those payments, you have to be EPEing a project, which means you are working on a project that is owned by the portfolio. If you're working on a project that's not owned by the portfolio, then it doesn't count. Or if enough of the EPEs figure that you're not doing anything, I'm sure that they will call to revolt, or be like, "What are you doing? Get to work." Something like that. Yeah. So that's generally how that works in that brilliantly clear explanation that I gave, which I know all of you have heard 500 times. So why don't we ask questions and I'll try to answer them.
You guys, Brian here. I'm just going to spearhead my thoughts on this. Roger, I fully understand exactly what this is. We all have a set of expectations, and we all hold accountability to it, and we all agree with these terms. And honestly, I'm going to leave the terms up to you because that's your realm. Here's at least what I'm trying to offer. Got the bill paying money coming in. There's no problem with that. This little news tech website, TechVecchi, just built it so this could be my experiment into converting this website just to be bringing in Hoove.
Okay.
Now, my question is how to get to that, how to sell that with a tech news site that's just going to be pumping out information that hopefully people will drive to.
So any property, any website, any domain, anything that you're working on has value. Okay. That value is scored. It can be scored in a variety of different ways. In the case of a blog, somebody could come along and purchase your blog. That I'm going to come and buy your blog and put it on New York Times, and I'm going to give you $600,000 for that, right? That would be a $600,000 exit of your blog and its subscription list, essentially. Another way to do it is, the blog's bringing in 20 grand a month in cash, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense to sell it. So, in either case, there's value there. And so so there's value there, okay? Now, we have to figure out how.
So Roger, am I not to interrupt your flow, but am I best just to have these people pay obviously in U.S. fiat currency, and then we just start converting that over to Hoove and just kind of building that chest?
Nope. The way so a blog, like anything else, is just a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's more or less just a social media site. People sign up and subscribe.
100%.
Okay. And that business has a value. There's a value associated with that. Now, in order for that to qualify as the EPE project, there has to be some kind of way that Hoove can recognize that value. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. So all we have to do, and this goes for Marie's project and Steven's project, all we have to do is make that clear, right? If somebody offers you $1 million for your blog, right, where's that money gonna go? Okay? If you have a separate corporation, it would go into that corporation, right? And if okay, I won't start that. If it's a separate, so let's just say Amex wants to pay you 10 grand to run some ads on your blog. If you have a corporation that owns that blog, that corporation would get $10,000, right? And then you would use that money to continue growing that corporation. That corporation will increase in value as you bring in more revenue. Because one, the blog is owned by a separate corporation, okay? And you would just charge that corporation. You would send them a bill, and they would pay the bill, and then you would do what they paid you to do, right? Put the ads on the site. That corporation now has $5,000 that it can use to grow itself, right? Um, Wonderful. Now, if it's a separate corporation and you want that to serve as your EPE duty, right? You meeting your duty to the others. Um, we would put equity from that corporation under Hoove. So Hoove would become a shareholder in that company, such that if somebody then came along and tried to paid $1 million to buy that corporation, that $1 million would then be distributed to the shareholders. One of which would be you, one of which would be, well, let's say one of which is Jeremy because he's working with you on it, and
Gotcha.
he's got a 30%. Your your stake though, your stake in that company would be owned by Hoove, so you'd be representing Hoove as a shareholder in that thing. So if it's $1 million and we have a 50-50 deal, Jeremy would get $500,000, and then $500,000 would go into Hoove, which would then be distributed to all the EPEs. Okay, and that would be you meeting your duty, just like on the Hexamon project. There's Matt, Marie, and Ricketts. Matt and Marie are not getting their EPE duties fulfilled from that. They just have their individual interest. But Ricketts is fulfilling his EPE duty from that. So Matt and Marie would just get paid out cash in the exit, and then Ricketts' bunch would come into Hoove and be distributed across the EPEs. So you can, as long as you're fulfilling your EPE duty with one project, you can work on however many other projects you want to. Of course, if you're like spreading yourself way too thin and your EPE project is like stalling or isn't getting any attention, well, the other EPs might notice that and they'll be like, what the fuck? I'm doing all this work on my EPE project. You're not doing yours. This is bullshit.
Totally.
And now there's no real way to like adjudicate that. It's just kind of like a social shaming thing. It's like, we got you. Work on your EPE project. I know you've got side ones, but make it your thing. And so, and so then, so what would the punishment be? Well, let's say that, let's say people found out that you weren't really, working too hard on it on the EP project. Not you, Brian. I know you're not. I'm just saying generally. So let's say somebody found out you weren't working too hard on it, and then for whatever reason that project dissolves. Right, the company goes bust, and the shares are no longer worth anything because nobody's working on it. It's totally dead. Well, if people didn't think you were doing a good job on that, right, and then you said, hey guys, I need to get my EPE duty filled, we'd all be like, okay, go find a project. I'm not going to find one for you. It's a waste for me to give you projects, right? So that's kind of the penalty you'll pay later on.
Gotcha.
Is people probably won't want to give you, help you find another project to work on. Now, you don't only have to EPE a project in order to fulfill that duty. You can also spend 10K AR on a project. So if you have 10K AR, you can spend that to support another project, and you will have fulfilled your duty for that year. So, if any exits happen during that year, as long as you've fulfilled your duty, then you're good. It's a little risky because if you don't, you'd have to really you'd want to have to pay your 10K AR at the beginning of the year so that you're in compliance. Because if an exit happens in February and you're not fully paid up, well, people are going to be like, you didn't do your job. It's a little safer to be on an EPE project because you're kind of always in compliance as long as you're doing work on it. But these are the types of things where it's like your call. Like, is it easier for you to just collect 10K AR and then throw it at a project so you're good, or is it easier for you to focus on one project for a while, and that's kind of up to there's pros and cons to each.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and Roger, I was just setting my situation up as an example. You know, like this is the first project I'm pretty solidly into. I feel like there could be some
Well,
I
it's perfect. It's perfect, and it doesn't even need to be something that's going to be successful. Kind of the point of this whole thing is you can work on stuff without worrying if it's going to succeed or not.
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
enough people are working on stuff, crazy stuff, that one of them is eventually going to hit something, right? And that means that you can take more risks with your projects. As long as everybody's like, yeah, go for it, right? Yeah, yeah, that counts, and nobody's gonna, be up your ass for it.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't worry so much like this one's gonna be successful, this one isn't. I would just go after a project, and then keep everybody posted on it. Like what you said today is great, awesome. There's great stuff coming in. The only problem is we have no direct interest. I'll give a good. John was like, "Hey, we got some more critter sales." I'm like, "Well, okay, great." Or some. No, that's not a good example. Somebody the other day was like, "Hey, I just closed this huge deal at my day job," and I'm like, "Well, I don't care. That doesn't benefit me at all. Why are you telling me this?" Right?
Sure,
Um,
sure, sure.
but it's awesome because I get to. Well, I don't give a shit. So because there's no interest in the blog right now. There's no financial interest in it. It's almost like, what do I care that there's all this great stuff happens? Like I'm happy for you, but we have no interest. So, but all we got to do is just get this interested. Now I know I have not been really good at explaining all of this stuff. It's just going to take time to do it. It's a really easy move for us to get who's interested in that. It's a really simple document I put together. I downloaded it, I adjusted it a little bit for our needs, and it's great. What this thing allows people to do is not have to form a corporation. That said, if you're not forming a corporation and Amex wants to pay you $5,000 to place ads on your site, they're not just going to write you a personal check. You need to set up a corporation to do that. If you don't have a corporation set up for this, or the money flowing into something that Hoove has a direct interest in, then you can have them pay into Hoove, right? And Hoove acts as your corporation. But if Hoove's going to pay if Amex is going to pay VNEC, for example, right? Then even if we have an interest in the idea and the concept, well, the money's going to a different corporation. So in order for Hoove to see any benefit from that, it would need to own part of that VNet corporation in order to do it, right? Wherever the money's going, wherever it's being recognized from an accounting perspective, Hoove needs to have a financial interest in it. Otherwise, it's kind of like technically it's embezzlement. It's
Well,
not to
no,
put
no,
too.
Roger. I mean, all it is just VNet or whatever company becomes the client of Hoove. I mean, it's just a
Well,
middleman scenario. It's like,
in order for it to qualify as an EPE company, the money has to go to a property that Hoove has an interest in,
oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
right? So if it goes to VNEC, Hoove doesn't have an interest in VNEC. So even though the money's towards that project, VNEC's
It's not going to
handling,
work.
right?
Hmm.
VNEC's handling the cash, and we don't see any of that reflected in our deal flow books. If it's a separate corporation, that's great, right? And then whoever owns and manages that corporation, whoever manages that corporation, uses that money to grow it. But if none of those exist, that's what this document's here for. Because if you're just have an idea and two people are working on it, well, there's no corporation to handle any issues of disagreement between ownership. But this document says like this is what's going to happen with the money. This is what we're each putting into it. This is what we're each going to do. Um, and then the corporation that recognizes the revenue, that pays the taxes, that does all that corporate stuff would be Hoove, would be the Hoove Group. So if you don't want to form a corporation, Hoove is there to do it. You of course have a little less control over the cash because it goes into Hoove, which then converts into your AR. All right, Amex pays $5,000 for the thing. They pay it into Hoove because you don't want to form a corporation. Well, $5,000 goes into Hoove, into the liquidity pool, increasing the dividend, which is awesome. But then you also
Hmm.
get 5K AR, right? Which you can then use to do whatever you want with, right? So because you're working on the project, the AR that comes in from that goes to you to manage.
Yeah, and essentially, I can look at all the projects we got running and put my 5 AR towards that project to bring in, let's say, we need, I don't
Well,
know, a
well,
smartphone app person or something. Is
if
that
you
is
were not if you were not EPE compliant, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If you're not working on an EPE project, the other way you can do this is spend 10K of your AR to become and that on a portfolio project that we own. Right? You're contributing to growing something that we own. Um, so that would count. But if you're EPE compliant, right, you then don't need to spend it on another project. You're probably better off spending it on your project, right,
Gotcha,
or
gotcha,
anything else that you wanna spend it on.
gotcha.
Right, right. So any AR that comes in from that project is yours to manage. The cash itself, right? You don't really see a direct benefit from that unless you're also on the board and getting a dividend because that's going to increase the float and thus increase the dividend. So it would then be in your interest to like say I made 15K AR. I'm an EPE now. This is awesome. I'm running a business that just brought in 50K cash, and all that cash went into Hoove, and now I've got another 50K AR. Right? Well, hey, badass. You know that gets your AR way up over 30, and now you can join the board as well. And even in that case, it would go over 45, and you could like take a little payment out.
Gotcha, gotcha. Or okay, so let me throw this
But
scenario.
at that point, if it's making that much money, we're going to spin it out into a separate corporation. If you're making over 15 grand a month on your EPE project, we're spinning that out into a separate corporation.
Yeah, it would just become its own identity. No, I totally get it.
Well, no, we'd create a full corporation around it, and then you would be running that corporation, and shares of that corporation would be split between. If you have two partners, those two partners would get equity, and then your equity would be in Hoove, and you'd be representing that on
Got it, got
the
it.
corporation.
Okay, so Roger, so here's a scenario. Now, keep in mind that this project is in its infancy,
This is
but
perfect.
like for this site, it would be really awesome to get people who are devoted to each of the sections. So, for example, Jeremy's into fitness. He's establishing his name around the fitness kind of industry,
I
and
got you. I got you 100%. So in that case, Jeremy, right? He's an owner of this, right? So he's an owner of this project, and in that document, we're gonna have, you know, the founders are gonna be listed as, Idea Trek. You would be assigned as the EPE, Brian. So your stake in that company would be under Hoove, and you'd be representing Hoove in on that project. The
yeah,
second founder would be Jeremy. Okay, so now Jeremy has an interest in writing for the blog, getting it to an exit and getting it to make money. Because in this case, right, if there's two of you founders and that 5 grand cash comes in, well,
yep,
2,500 is going to go to Jeremy and 2,500 is going to go to you, right? Split. So Jeremy's going to get some value from this as well because he's in part owner of the project.
yep. Okay, so
Um,
so Roger, to just interrupt you though. So let's just say I grabbed one, two, three, four, five other people that were outside of the Hoove spectrum
yep,
to help out.
yep.
So how would that go down?
Sure.
Because that's
So,
essentially what I have to do.
so we're going to say two things then. We're going to say, hey, you're awesome. The best way for you to leverage the value that you're generating from this is to become a Hoover, and you can either take ownership of this project, become a founder on it, right? Or Brian, when he collects, Brian will make a deal with you and say pay you 100 AR per article you write, or something like that. And if they're like, no, I don't want to join a DAO or anything like that, I just want to get paid in cash. Well, in that case, right, you, Brian, would then have to, um, if you have enough AR, okay, if you're over the mark where you can take cash out, which by the mark is for you and for everybody who's in the Shangri La group is 45,000 AR.
Understood.
Okay, if you have 100,000 AR after an exit, you can cash out 55 grand because you need to keep a minimum of 45K AR there. So now you can either say to this person, I'm going to pay you You could say them. You could just pay them. Well, a couple things could happen. You could just pay them cash out of your pocket. You could just pay them $500. Okay, and then what you would do is submit an expense report to Hoove. Okay, Hoove would realize that as an expense, and then issue you 500 AR. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you could say, "Hey guys, I don't want to pay them 500 cash, but I'm not above my 45K to be able to take cash out to pay them without approval. So I'm going to submit a request to withdraw $500 to pay this person, even though I'm below the thing." And then everybody's got to vote on that. Okay. And if they approve it, then great. We'll take $500 out of the float, right? So our dividend will drop, right? So that you can pay the person to do that. Okay. The third way to do it is they become a Hoover, and you just pay them in your AR. You can either realize an expense for Hoove and get AR for it. You can take cash out of your pocket and get AR for it as an expense. You can ask the rest of the group if they're okay paying some cash for it, because we all want an exit, right? And if that person coming in to do it is going to be awesome and get us closer to an exit, yeah, sure, we'll reduce our float for a little bit, right? Knowing that we're going to get a big windfall of cash in later. That's up to everybody to kind of vote on and decide. Ideally, we can convince them to become a Hoover, and you can pay them in AR.
Gotcha. Roger, thanks. Yeah, like Roger, seeing it from that point of view, I definitely have a little bit of a better understanding of like how to use the flexibility of just the DAO and of the Hoove. Just give everyone the the kind of exact governance, so like over the project. No one's higher than the other person. Yeah, man, I think this is gonna work out, dude.
You have a lot of choices. There's almost too many choices. But that's kind of the point. And I think it's gonna take everybody a little bit of time to realize what the choices are, and then figure out a strategy on how to use all those so that they can then get their project to an exit, quickly, or have it fail quickly so that they can move on to the next one. So there's a little bit of trust required here that nobody's going to be like, "Oh boy, everybody else is working so hard, I'm going to just loaf it a little bit right now." But that person will wash out. Like we'll find those people. We'll find them, right? They will be absolutely clear to everyone.
Well, Roger, no one's used to working like this either. Like this is a new concept for quite a bit of people. A lot of people playing the safe way to live and don't want to take the risks. And you know what I'm saying? Like I get where we're coming from. Like, we live in a world where people don't trust each other, and people scurry to their jobs and they work, and then they you know what I mean? It's a totally different approach to building a business.
Straight up. No, that's the whole idea. Is you can take risks, and you're not going to eat it if your risk fails.
Roger, you stepped so far away from the mic, it sounded like you started climbing a mountain.
Oh, sort of.
I'm just kidding. All right, cool.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Anyways. Oops.
So can we just clear a couple things up then? So I guess the first one is, right, I thought someone took the responsibility, at least I thought so, to keep track of EPE projects and who is on them.
Did.
Okay.
Jeremy's job is just to keep that list, so that if anybody has a question, who's working, like if you see somebody has the EPE tag, right? And you're like, who is that person? Well, rather than sort of just wondering about it, you can say, "Hey, Jeremy, what's this person working on?" And Jeremy will be able to tell you. You should.
Yeah, and also adding to that, it's kind of like we do a weekly check, and like Roger basically the other day was like, Jeremy, where are we if we're doing a strict like overview? And then as paperwork is being filled out and everything else, it'll be a little more fluid in the upcoming weeks where everybody's at with their projects and who needs one and who doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Jeremy's just kind of the librarian on that one. Anybody could do that. Everybody could be keeping a running tally if they want, right? But just Jeremy has said he wants to do it. So like if I ever have a question or something, I'm going to publicly call out Jeremy rather than Ricketts for the list. But everybody could conceivably keep their own list and slap the stragglers.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that person, Jeremy, you're going to at least for now just keep a high level overview, and that may turn into something a little bit more like
In depth, yeah, that'll definitely be more in depth over time as it gets refined.
yeah. Yeah, I just
Eventually,
think putting people on blast and being like, hey, I've been hearing a lot of things. Submit me weekly status reports or something like that, right? Just to give me a heads up, like, hey, something's going on, and then that might be too far, but just
well,
as an idea.
eventually this will become like the tokens, like the dividend tokens. Um, we're not there yet,
Right,
but
right.
eventually there will be a whole like you've earned your token for the next exit type thing. And if you don't have that NFT and the exit comes along, then you won't get paid out by the treasury, right? Because once all this is totally decentralized, it's not going to be me double checking everything to make sure people got paid out. You got to make sure you have your NFT. We're working on that stuff together. So once
Yep.
we get all the other stuff in place, that's going to be the really complicated one though. So we'll do that one last.
Yeah, that has so many factors on it.
So many. So it's wild. It's wild. So for now, it's easier to just keep it, us kind of doing it manually until we figure out what a process would even look like for validating it.
Um, I did have something else. I forgot what it was. Um,
Jason had a great one last week. It was, maybe it wasn't Jason, or it was something related to what Jason was saying. So for however long we've been doing this, people have always said there has to be more rules, there has to be more clear things, or there has to be more democracy, or there has to be more stuff where we all have to agree, or something like that. So most DAOs work where everybody has tokens or some amount of tokens or some amount of whatever, and any decision that comes up, we're going to buy this, we're going to cross the street, we're going to send this tweet, has to be voted on. And so the DAO works kind of like a decentralized autonomous entity. Um, um, that's not really how this one works at its core. At the core is just the tokenomics and the way that we handle ownership of entities, the way that we handle how the money moves in and out. And all of those are separated. All those responsibilities and duties are separated to different groups. And joining one group gives you some advantages and some disadvantages. So you will never end up in a situation where like one person could control everything once this is fully decentralized. I kind of control everything right now, but once it goes into the smart contracts, nobody will be able to control all that stuff. And so how do you form a tokenomics that can survive like that? Most of them don't. Most of these DAOs crumble, or they do stupid shit, or it becomes just a game where they get hacked, and depleted. But one thing you can do if you want to say implement new rules or put new structures in place is you could find a couple other Hoovers and say, hey, we want to have more democracy. Well, all you'd have to do is get those Hoovers to agree, and then you would essentially pool your tokens together, and those token pools could have their own set of rules, their own complete set of rules. You could completely make them up over how you guys would distribute your tokens to each other, and you could even build smart contracts that would transfer your tokens amongst each other, and any returns that you get from anything else. You'd still be subject to Hoove tokenomics, just like everything's subject to the laws of physics. But you could manipulate those in such a way that your group, might outperform the general group, right? So you might have your gang, and your gang sees a 20% return, however you organized it, while everybody else only saw 15. So then more people would want to join your group and follow your rules. That's perfectly possible. So if you've ever thought like, I want to do more rules, this should work this way, this should work that way, you have absolute freedom to be able to do that. You just have to get other people to pool their tokens with you, and then that faction becomes its own thing. You know what it was? Somebody was like, we should all be working on the same project. Well, here's how that would work. You would get everybody to pool their tokens together, and you'd say, 5 of you get your EPE duty by putting 10K tokens into our combined pool. The leader will get their EPE duty by actually working on the portfolio project. And then when the exit happens, let's say there's 10 EPEs and 5 of you are in a cabal. Well, 50% of the return is going to go to you 5, right? So there you go. You basically formed a group that has its own entirely independent rules, while still benefiting. Now, you're not mandating that everybody in the group join you. You're sort of saying we're doing better than you would if you were on your own, and then people can choose to join you or not. So if you're like, we should all be working on one project, there's a path to do that. You just have to get everybody to want to work on your project and then pool all their tokens to help out on it.
100%, Roger. Definitely.
Yeah, I think you and I were talking about something like that, where you're essentially forking the Hoove tokenomics.
You are you're forming a sub DAO, which
Right.
is technically a fork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I think it all
the fork would be developing your own set of smart contracts that actually manage it.
Yeah, I think that was a topic I had brought up originally, just talking about being able to rob a bank, and you said no, that's perfectly legal. It's the risk is on whoever's robbing the bank, not on Hoove.
Right.
They're just bringing that money in, right?
Right.
Which makes sense.
Sort of. I mean, I guess we would be considered money launderers at that point, but
Yeah.
But other than that, I would say, okay, go launder them. I wonder if there would actually be a move in place. Oh, if you just brought $50,000, because you would just.
Yeah, how are you to know that the person robbed the bank unless that person told you, or unless it was a directive by someone within Hoove to say, go rob that bank?
Right, which even if it was, there really even wouldn't be a way. The bank's not paying Hoove, so, and there would be no service provided. So I guess the person could come in and say, I have $50,000. Here's $50,000 to design me a logo, and then Hoove would realize the revenue as logo design or something, right?
Yeah, all sounds legit so far.
Yeah, and as long as there wasn't any conspiracy, and we didn't know. Let's say we did know. What would happen if we did know? Well, no, because they'd just be hiring another Hoover to do it. The Hoover would send them an SLA. It would be on. This is interesting. I have to think more about that.
Yeah. Anyway.
I am in favor of robbing banks, though, so I'm not going to ask questions.
Right. So I guess one of the things that just to clarify to myself, and I guess to Brian and maybe a few other people, these projects are not meant to be, well, truly not meant to be quick and dirty. Some of them you may want to be quick and dirty, they come in, you do a project, you sell it within a year, everyone gets paid, everyone's happy. But it could just as easily, most of these projects could be 2, 3, 5, 10 years before you actually see anything, and an exit from it, and then any money from it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think if your work, it might be 10 years until you get to like $100 billion valuation. Right. But in the meantime, you might get to a point where you could justify a $10 million valuation, at which point Hoove might want to exit it out its position. So this is a good example. Okay, this is a good example. Somebody brings a project into Hoove, and we do all the work, and it turns out we help them get from a brand new company that was just an idea to a $10 million valuation. Legitimate, like audited $10 million valuation. And we're like, hey, sell your company. Like, let's get an exit on the books. They're like, no, I don't want to. Well, a very common practice is a partner just says, we want to exit out of this. And that founder actually then can go to a bank and you can get a nice fat loan from the bank to buy out your partner against a well-documented valuation. So, we don't have to sit around for 10 years and wait for that to happen. We can exit early. But another scenario would be like, what about like heavy R&D, where you literally are doing 10 years to figure out the biology, and you do need hundreds of billions of dollars to actually get through everything. That's probably not an appropriate project for us to work on. We might, Hoove might be good for developing the trials, finding trialing members, right, to support that. But yeah, we probably couldn't do any heavy duty biotech in here. It is generally quick and dirty. But that doesn't mean that sometime down the future, if we have a big enough float, the board members, the people who make their dividend, their dividend, part of that comes, from new cash that comes in. But the money's just sitting in an interest-bearing account, right, or a stock market, right, which is short-term investments and stuff like that. Well, there could be a period where, like, if there's $10 million in there and we want to put $2 million into a 10-year, biotech move, like, there's no reason we couldn't do that. It would just hurt the float in the short term, so dividends would be low for the next couple of years. But then when it pays out, let's say it pays out 500-fold, right, because they find the vaccine or whatever. Well, now the float is ridiculously high and a massive dividend for that next year, right? I don't know that we do anything like that now. We definitely wouldn't do anything like that now. We have to try to stay liquid in the meantime, but there's definitely a scenario where we could jump in on those rounds. And what I'm going to start doing next year. So next year, I'm going to say to everybody, pick a stock, and our portfolio will be composed of all the board members' stock picks. And I'm going to put in a trailing percentage stop loss of 7%. So if it drops 7%, it's going to sell, and I'll say, hey, whatever, that one didn't work out. Pick another one, right? But if it jumps 20% and then drops down to 13%, it'll sell. Hey, we made it good. We'll pick another one, right? I'm going to have a 7% trailing stop loss on all of these things. And if that ever triggers, I'll just say pick a new one. So everybody's going to have a hand in picking the investments. And it just, once we get to a certain level, a size of this account, because we'll be adding new cash to it from new exits, and we'll be adding new cash to it from things like Trek Agency and these NFT sales. We're going to be continuing to add cash to it. We're going to continue to see returns on this. This liquidity pool is going to grow over time, and we're going to be able to do more interesting investments more interesting investments. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, in 5-10 years, when hopefully we have a ton of cash in there to be able to consider a biotech investment or something like that. I don't know what the approval process will look like to do that, but That's something we can figure out then.
Roger, Brian here again. So could we just go? Could you just give us a brief synopsis of the projects that everyone's working on? Because everyone's obviously really involved in Discord, but I'm only going to certain channels. I'm not digging through everyone's channel and what they're doing every week or something like that.
I don't know what everybody's doing, Jeremy.
I mean, if we don't have the answers to this now, it's no big deal. But I think like if we could just all kind of,
I'm being tongue in cheek, Brian. I know what everybody's working on, but this is a perfect thing. Like this is what Jeremy stepped up to do. Like he's holding the list, right, of what everybody's
totally.
You know what? Actually, let's not even do that right now. Let's have Jeremy prep something later, and maybe next week. You know what? Maybe next week, Jeremy leads this call like Matt did last week, and he goes over all the projects.
Perfect. I love it.
Because that'll give us a week to get everybody signed in, so they're official.
I love it.
Yep. Nice. Yes, the Hoove Recruiter project would be awesome. And there's a ton of ways to make a ton of cash from that. Is a cash cow recruiting if you can get it done.
Would there be an interest in, like, could we conduct AR transactions directly from another Wix site, or I'm just wondering the logistics of that because that could be very useful.
From another Wix site?
As in, because I'm going to make it in Wix just for sake of using the collections and stuff like set up. But it would there could be like payment on that site in a different way, like a ledger to keep track. But it would be cool if it could actually interact with official AR.
Oh, we totally could.
Oh,
totally could. We totally could. Right now, that would just mean opening up an endpoint on the database that it's held in right now. And all we'd really be doing is automating the move where, we could definitely do that. And this could sprawl out like crazy. Exactly what all that would look like, I'd have to sit down and do it, right, to figure it out. You know this. But absolutely, somebody could tap in and do an AR request from any other site, right, that has access to the endpoint.
Okay, that's awesome because I'm really getting a sense that this project I kind of chose randomly at first is going to be pretty useful if it's executed well. I kind of got the idea from talking that who referred me that like USC football guy doing the site, like whatever. But he was a bit confused by trying to interact with the organization through Discord, and I figure that people who are shopping for talent essentially might have a better time going through like a streamlined interface where we still get notified on the back end in Discord, so we can talk amongst ourselves and make deals and yeah.
We can do all sorts of hooks. We can do crazy. We can go wild with it.
Yeah. So yeah, as long as that's
and so over time, all the UX stuff will work itself out naturally. That's the other thing. Like we're all in this, and we all kind of know it's scrappy, and we're figuring out. But at the same time, we're also building it while we're doing it. For people who that building process isn't fun for them, and they just want their answer and their thing immediately, as though it was packaged perfectly by Facebook, we can't do anything to help those people. There's nothing. They don't get it, right? And we can't really help them yet. But over time, as more people come in and like to build stuff, all this stuff will become super smooth. As long as people are doing the work. If nobody does anything, right, and just expects it to happen magically, or that I'm going to somehow sit down and do it all, it's I'm going to get as far as I can, but I'm only one person.
Steven, that project that you're working on sounds incredible, by the way.
Well, I really appreciate it, guys. I didn't know there'd be such interest. And by the way, I'm trying to take a very humble approach as kind of like sort of an outsider in the organization just joining. So I am really like all ears as to features that you think are the most important or certain ways it should work. Like I want to hear any suggestions. Please message me, and I will try to build it.
I mean, you are absolutely equal with every single other person here, including myself, in terms of what you're going to get out of this. So you don't have to ask for any permission to do anything, no matter what.
Well, not permission, but I mean, like, people who've been in the Discord for months and months, might have a better idea of how these deals go down, and that would be helpful. So not permission, like actually advice and guidance.
Okay.
Did you guys like the logo?
I haven't seen the logo. Where is it?
Let me send it in. What chat should I send it in? Discussion.
I only keep saying the permission thing because I just don't want people to feel like they have to ask me to do things. The only thing you can't do is change the tokenomics. You can do whatever you want.
Just resend it in your in the Hoove Recruiter chat. We should all have access to that anyway.
Wait, where? I'm so sorry. Oh, there it is.
Oh, Steven, I see the logo here. Hoove Recruiter. I like it.
There it is. Okay, the chair.
So Steven, so the front end is going to connect with the back end of Discord, and Discord essentially is going to be the back end running the business.
Well, the chat service will be through Discord. I figure why reinvent the wheel when we have like a very good chat-based platform that we're all on here, and then we can just really. Wix is pretty robust, but we can use their Ascend integrations to send data out to Zapier and webhooks and other things, and then kind of do anything from there, like wire up any behavior, get my LifeX bulbs blinking or whatever when we get a sale.
Dude, that sounds awesome.
Well, thank you. And the logo is kind of a joke. It was my, I made that in Canva in like 7 minutes. Just
That's where the Hoove logo came from too. In less than 7 minutes.
I'll tell you for that video at the beginning of the YouTube videos that I'm recording and uploading, and I posted it I think in a couple other places, but that came from a different site, and I just plugged in a couple things, uploaded the logo, and so sometimes the best things in life are free.
Yes, they are. Quick and dirty.
the more graphic design I do, the more I literally just Google around for PNGs, vector trace them, cut them up, and put them together. Like that's it. I make clipping masks and gradients. That's it.
Yeah, not to diminish any designers, but yeah, sometimes it's just easier to do it yourself. Take 5 minutes.
That's all the designers are doing too. Nobody's sitting there drawing the outlines. Are they, Marie?
No, we just search for Google clip art. That's all we do.
Tricks of the trade.
That's how software works too. You just I just say JavaScript random number. Oh, okay. Copy paste.
There's
Fake
no
it.
use to invent wheels, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think this was a good discussion on all this. Like, it certainly cleared up some of my questions that I had on the EPE, and what that actually means. Because I was trying to follow along with that discussion in there earlier, whatever chat it was, but I couldn't quite follow it because there were some behind the scenes discussions that wasn't there. So that certainly helped. Thanks.
There's been so many behind the scenes discussions, and I try to talk about it all the time, almost just to through repetition get it sunk in the heads. But the more we talk about it,
I'm so sorry to ask, but I got really caught up today and joined late. Only if it can be summarized in like 30 seconds. Like, did I miss critical information earlier for me, or should I?
nothing I haven't told you before, Steven.
And
Okay.
and this whole thing has been recorded, and it will be on YouTube later. Even though it won't be fun to watch, but you'll at least be able to hear it.
No, that's great. I'm still
Okay.
halfway through that we recorded last time, and it's been really helpful.
Good. Yeah, I'm gonna try and record as many of these as I can, at least the ones that are pertinent. I don't think like the weekly meet and greets are pertinent enough, but I think for a lot of the other discussions, last week's, this week's, I think next week's talking about like EPE projects. Certainly, we can put that up there, unless anyone has any problems with that information getting out. I can still record it though, and I can edit that out or do something. So just let me know. But I will generally be recording a lot of these.
Bum.
That sounds good.
Librarian, then. That's an important job, actually.
So why don't we 7 o'clock? So I need to get signs from Murphy, Steven, from Marie, Steven, and Brian, and that document I will share the link again. If you guys could actually copy the doc on your own and then share it back with me, and write in the highlighted yellow parts, that would be awesome. And then I can get those to Jeremy. He's gonna take care of them, and
Where are you gonna post that? Are you gonna send it to us individually, or post it
I'm just
somewhere?
kind of posting it randomly in different channels right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Roger, I got mine. I'll definitely fill it out tonight. Send it back tomorrow.